Welcome, fellow bookworms, to Tibra's Den. My name is Whitney, and today I have my May wrap up. May was a pretty good month. It kind of drug on a little bit for me. I started it off a little rough. I had a hurt foot, and that was kind of distracting, so I didn't read as much as I wanted to. But overall, pretty good month. I ended up getting 19 books read. Added on some books, didn't read some other books. But as far as my TBR game prompts go, I did fulfill everything. I had one book that I started and didn't finish, but I started and I read 159 pages. So I haven't had this situation come up before. So I decided what I'm going to do in that situation. If I have one book left and I started it, I won't get a reward token, but I also don't have to read that book before I start on the next TBR. So in this case, June TBR, because that's kind of my punishment is I have to choose one book to roll over and I have to read it before I can start on next month's TBR. This one, I really want to savor it, so I'm going to roll it over. Of course, I want to finish it, but I'm going to read it as I start other books for my June TBR. And so, yeah, the fact that I completed and started every book on my TBR list from the game was fantastic. I did have some books that I wanted to read that were kind of rollovers or extras that I didn't get to, but overall it was a really, really great month. So let's kind of get into it. I did participate in two readathons. First one was Spoonies Readathon, which was put on by Naomi at Naomi's Bookshelf and Emily at Novels. And so I did that, and that was a lot of fun. They had different prompts, which I'll go through as I hit the books. They also had a self care day, which I went to the thrift store and got some books, and then I got myself some lunch as well, an iced coffee. We don't have very many options, and the only iced coffee I like, as far as that's in my town, is McDonald's iced coffee. So I went and got that. That's kind of a special treat for me. I don't drink it a whole lot in general. So yeah, that was kind of a nice day. That was my self-care day. Another prompt was to recommend some creators with disabilities, and I had two that I recommended when I said that I was participating, but I'll go ahead and recommend it again. So the first one is Carissa at Sweet Tea Reads. She actually just reached 200 subscribers, so definitely go check out her channel and subscribe. And the other one is Ava at Ava's Romance Books. She's a bigger channel, but she recommends a lot of books with disability rep in them, which is fantastic. So those are the two channels I recommend. I'll leave all the channels linked down below. I also participated in Escape the Readathon, which was put on by Books with Lexi. And there was 4 teams, all kinds of different co-hosts. I was on Team Film Crew, and we actually won. So that was really, really fun. The readathon itself was, I have mixed feelings. It was a lot of fun. I just don't think it was for me. It's great if you're a mood reader, and the whole premise of it is fantastic. Lexi put so much work into it. But it's kind of based on her game. So you're moving through these rooms. So as you're moving through the rooms, you mood read. And then when you reach a door, she gave us 2 prompts. One prompt would unlock the door, the other prompt wouldn't unlock the door. And so your team is kind of trying to read both prompts, figure out which door is the correct door to be able to unlock, or which prompt is the correct prompt to be able to unlock the door, and then you'd be in the next room, so you'd move read as you move across the room. So the premise was really cool, but the way I already had my set TBR, and I kind of like to read like in an order, like I'm not really strict with that order, but I kind of have an idea of which books and where I want to go. And so it was really hard for me. The mood read parts were fantastic because I could just read the books I was planning on reading next, but the prompts were hard. And I really didn't feel like I was pulling my weight on those sections. But it was a lot of fun. I think I might participate next year, and I think if I do, I'm just gonna do it kind of as I don't have a set TBR. I might skip my game that month and just participate because the premise of it is so cool and it is so much fun. And like I said, she put a lot of work. It was hard for me to participate and feel like I was pulling my weight as far as the door prompt goes. But yeah, really, really fun. So I'll leave her channel link down below as well. But yeah, those were a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get into the books. And yeah, I'm gonna go through. I know I've been kind of playing around with how I do my wrap ups. I'm gonna go through based on star rating, and then I'll let you know what prompt it was for and whether it fulfilled. I didn't keep track on Escape the Readathon what books were mood reads, what books fulfilled what prompts. It was that was just too much. Because like I said, I didn't know what prompts were coming up, and so I didn't log them. Like I would just read the book, and if it worked for a prompt, I would log it. But I did, obviously have books specific for the Spoonies readathon, so I'll mention those. So first up, so 1 star is a DNF. I did not have any DNFs, so that was really good. But the next star rating, of course, is 2 stars. This first book, it's not that it's the bottom of the barrel as far as enjoyment or anything like that. It's just I can't really rate this book, so I just put it down at the bottom. And I didn't rate it on Goodreads or anything. I just marked that I read it, and I only read certain stories in it, and that is Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. Um, and so this one I did use for the Spoonies Readathon. I used it for a classic with a disability rep and a comfort read, because obviously fairy tales, grew up with them, they're very comforting, and I would consider Grimm's fairy tales classics. So but for this one, I read 6 different fairy tales. I read Cinderella, Rapunzel, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, The Two Travelers, Hans my Hedgehog, and Old Sultan. And all of them, I chose those fairy tales based on another book I'm going to talk about, which fulfills a prompt. And it's basically, I'll get to it, but it's Disfigured, which talks about disability in fairy tales and such. So I chose these fairy tales specifically because of that. And they all have, like characters going blind. And Hans, my hedgehog, he's half hedgehog. And so it was kind of like his parents didn't want him. There was a princess that didn't want to marry him, even though her father, for Hans's help, promised her hand in marriage. They said no, and then another princess, same thing happened, but she agreed to marry him anyway. And it's just kind of about how your worth is not necessarily in how you look, um, but how that's presented. Like, because yeah, he initially is a hedgehog, and but she was relieved, and she didn't want to marry him while he was a hedgehog. And then because she agreed to marry him anyway, then he transforms into this handsome prince, and kind of how fairy tales does that. It's not enough that you're worthy, even with this, disfigurement or disability, that if somebody shows you kindness in spite of that, that then you'll be transformed and all is well. It's just kind of, anyway. And then Old Sultan was about this old dog who the owners were going to get rid of because he was no longer worthy. And then this wolf comes in and was like, I'll pretend to attack, and then you can chase me off, and they'll show that you're still worthy and such. And that was kind of sad. I had never read that one before. So yeah, this one's fun. It amounted to 35 pages, so this is the only one that I did not log for the Escape the Readathon. One, I didn't really know how to log it, and two, I think it had to be a minimum of 50 pages. So I did not log this one. It was just part of the Spoonies Readathon, and it was enjoyable. I like reading you know, the fairy tales and kind of their origins of how they started, and they're a little bit darker and such. So that was the first book. Then we had the only other 2 star is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. This one was for, I think it was through the Decades Challenge. And I got I think 1958 or something like that. So just a book that was written or set in the 1950s. And this one was written, it was supposed to be a sci-fi, but I couldn't find anything. I originally wanted to read, which this is kind of funny, it's going to come back into play later on. But I originally wanted to read Fahrenheit 451 by Bradbury. My husband has a collection of Ray Bradbury, and I figured that one would be in there, and it wasn't. And I literally had nothing else. So I went ahead and went with this, even though it's not quite sci-fi. And this one, again, the story, I understand why people like it, but I did not enjoy the writing. It was really came down to the writing style. I did not enjoy it at all. It was kind of a struggle to get through this book, even though it's super tiny. But the story itself and the premise I do enjoy. You basically have these boys who crash land on an island, and so they're kind of left to their own devices, and they're kind of trying to create like a little society, but then some of the boys just kind of go wild. So it is interesting, but it was rough to get through for me. So that was my other 2 star. Then we have 3 stars, which I say it's funny that I want to read Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury for that prompt, because then this one was for a sci-fi, but it was an employee or librarian pick. So I went to the little independent bookstore and had one of the employees pick out a sci-fi for me, and this is what they chose. So it was just kind of funny. It was like it was meant that I was supposed to read this month. And this again is kind of bottom barrel, and again it was kind of the writing. I did like the premise of it. In this world, it's set in the future, and you don't really have fires anymore. So as far as like all the houses and such are built with protection where they can't be lit on fire. And so you have these firefighters go through, and if somebody's hoarding and hiding books, they burn the books in the house down. So it's kind of firefighters starting fires instead of preventing them, or shutting them down, basically. And so, yeah, again, really interesting premise, but just the writing I didn't quite connect to as much. It felt a little rambly and whatnot, but still a really cool book, and I'm glad I did read it. This one I only read 158 pages. That's the story itself, and then it has all kinds of like this whole section back here is just like different history and such on um Fahrenheit 451. So I ended up not reading that. I was like, I don't really care. Honestly, I read the story. I'm happy with that. So that was kind of bottom of the barrel as far as 3 star reads go. And then the next one, which this one was hard because I wanted to love it, and I really enjoyed parts of it, but again, the writing. And that was Follow the River by James Alexander Thom. So this is based on the true ordeal of Mary Ingalls. So Mary Ingalls was a settler in 1755, and she got captured by Shawnee Native Americans and taken. Her and her sons got taken. And I really liked the story, the landscape and such. The way he described that was fantastic, but there was kind of misogynistic undertones, and just the way he wrote Mary as a character, like she was constantly thinking about sleeping with her husband, thinking about sleeping with this Native American chief that had captured her, and such. And so that got really old really quick. And even like how her husband's portrayed in her mind, later on he goes, this is kind of captures like the undertones throughout the whole book, but she's finally reunited with her husband, and so Will, which her husband was William, Will had even wondered, even while exhausting his every resource and risking his neck to retrieve her, whether this same lewd image would be his first thought upon seeing her again, and whether he would be charitable enough and tolerant enough in his soul to ever to draw her close to him again if he did think it. So basically saying, if she slept with this Native American, whether by force or not, that whether she was still worthy to lay with him. And that's kind of the undertones of the whole thing. And I read the notes and I kind of looked up her ordeal, and there's kind of conflicting things. Like, one, in this book, she's like full term pregnant and she has a baby on the trail, where that's kind of conflicting. People aren't sure if she was pregnant or not, but if she was, she wasn't definitely full term. There was a chance she was pregnant and then had the baby while she was in captivity, but he, I guess to add the drama. And then she's like having this attraction to the chief, which obviously never happened. There's these Frenchmen, which in here they buy her and such, and parts of that were true. Like she did work to, you know, sew and such for them and sell wares for them. But they, as far as the history shows, never bought her. And there's again like the one Frenchman wants to sleep with her, but she's not attracted to him. Just the chief and thinking about her husband. So yeah, just kind of that undertone got really really old, and it did drag a little bit. But overall, though, I was really glad I read this, and it's definitely gonna stick with me. And I like kind of getting her ordeal, and she travels an amazing amount of ground to get back to her settlement. So like from Ohio to Virginia. So really really cool. But the writer did not like that. And I mean, it's a male writer, and I think this was written in the 80s. So I can kind of understand why, but it just kind of really got under my skin. So, but I think I did actually give that one 3.5, not three. So there's that. And then the next I did give 3.5 was Untamed by Nora Roberts. Of course, Nora Roberts is my favorite author. And I have read this one before, so this was a reread for me. And this one, let's see, Follow the River was, I didn't say what it was for. So Follow the River was a historical, and it was Goldilocks, a female main. And then Untamed was actually my character. So I had gotten Piglet, and so it was an auto-by-author or a reread, which this one is both. And so this one, you have Jo, and she does the lions or the tigers. No, she does lions. Sorry, she does the lions in the circus act, and the owner of the circus dies, and then his son comes in, and he's trying to decide what to do with the circus. I always love the writing style of Nora Roberts. Like, absolutely love it. They're so easy to read. They're a lot of fun, very vivid. I did not like the main character, the male character in this. I like Jo, but the other one, Kian, he just, again, he was just kind of a jerk. Like, um, and I did not really really like his character at all. So there was that one, but still really fun, and it had kind of the traveling circus theme, which was a lot of fun, and I liked the lions. It made me cry at one point when one of the older lions passes away, but it's a really good story, and I gave that one 3.5 too, even though I did not like the male protagonist at all. Then we have our 4-star reads. So next up we have Dark Horse by Margaret Folk, and this was a mystery thriller with a sports wrap, which I was like, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find something for that. And this one has been on my shelf for years. Pretty sure my mom gave it to me at some point. Maybe she picked it up to read and then gave it to me. But it was just one I've had on my shelf, and it's part of a stack of books that are just on my shelf, so I didn't necessarily choose myself, and I'm just kind of get through and read. I actually really enjoyed this one. Obviously, 4 stars. So you have um, Coke McAllister passes away. He has a ranch and he breeds racing quarter horses. And so his daughter, Dakota, who's been out in California, she's trying to be an actress, ends up coming back out to the ranch because he leaves it to her. And his last wish is this filly, for her to race this filly. And so that's kind of his last wish. And then she has her ex, Clay, and so it's kind of a second chance romance trope in there as well. And so yeah, but there's something sinister going on, as far as surrounding Coke's death, and then somebody's harassing her as well. And I did kind of figure out the one character, but that, as far as the mystery of who's doing these things, but there's definitely multiple kind of things going on and twists and such. And overall, just really enjoy this one. It is a little bit dated as far as one of the characters, she's a little bit frumpy and such, but it's a little bit dated, but not too bad. And the story itself, and I love anything. If you're not into horses, I don't think you would enjoy this because it's very horse heavy, but I love horses, and so I really, really enjoyed everything about this. And it kind of takes place between Arizona and New Mexico, which of course I live in New Mexico. And so again, the local Southwest landscape, I always enjoy that in books. So this one, definitely good. I'm definitely going to be keeping it and I can reread it in the future. So there was that one. Then we had Songs of the Gorilla Nation by Don Prince Hughes, PhD. So this one was not on my game TBR. It was actually one I put on for Spoonies Readathon. It fulfilled the prompts of um, nonfiction and uh, book with a disability you relate to. So it fulfilled those prompts. And overall, I really, really enjoyed this. You know, it's more of a memoir than like information on autism. She was diagnosed with autism later in life. So it's more of her memoir and kind of her struggles growing up, and she didn't know she was autistic and such, and then her connection to these gorillas. Um, she ended up kind of working at a zoo and such. And I really kind of like this though because you see like she was homeless and then you see her whole story through, you know, getting her PhD and such. So it's really cool how you saw the rock bottom of her struggles with mental health and such, you know, and her struggles in general because she's autistic, and then, you know, how she kind of overcame those struggles, and how the gorillas helped her do that, and how the gorillas helped her connect with people in different ways as well. So really cool. It's more memoir, but kind of has that conservation aspect as well with the gorillas, and such. So yeah, overall, I really really enjoyed this. I marked little notes and such. This is just funny little things I connected to. Like one point, she's mentioning how she collected rocks as a kid. I did that. Like I had a whole little rock collection. Um, and then this first one I marked, so when I write, and even when I type, sometimes I have to go back through and try to fix it. I I capitalize certain words like that aren't supposed to. They're not the beginning of the sentence or whatever, and so they're not supposed to be capitalized. But I just capitalize them just because I don't know. It feels better to me. And she mentioned that she does that too. Like there's certain letters that she capitalizes. I haven't noticed a pattern in what I capitalize and what I don't. So it'd be interesting to kind of look through and see if there's certain letters that I capitalize. But it was just funny, like little things like that. And then she also mentioned that allergies and asthma and such are common in autistic folk. Like I didn't realize that, and I have really bad allergies, and I have asthma. Is not as bad as when I was a kid, but yeah. So I thought little things like that were interesting. But yeah, I really liked how it was a memoir, kind of meets that conservation aspect because I love books that deal with conservation and zoology and such. So that was really really cool. It kind of combined both those. The only thing I will say, which I noticed it on a review as well, is she does, you know, mention, so it's gorilla people, or orangutan people, and so she's really humanizing the the apes and such. So somebody really didn't like that on a review, and I was like, yeah, I did notice that, and it was kind of like confusing me a little bit at first. But yeah, really, really good. And like I said, it's not necessarily like if you're looking for information on autism, it kind of shows you that perspective a little bit, but doesn't give you a whole lot of information, if that makes sense. But yeah, really really good read. Definitely another one that I can see myself rereading in the future. Another one that made me cry because of the animals. So and then we have this one. So this is The Watery Part of the World by Michael Parker. This is one I found at a thrift store. Has actually pretty low reviews. I enjoy. Obviously, I gave it 4 stars, but basically, it's inspired by Theodosia Burr, who was Aaron Burr's daughter and disappeared off the coast of North Carolina or South Carolina, something like that. And so it's inspired by that and what potentially happened to her after she disappeared, because there's different rumors and such. And so basically, you have kind of that historical aspect, and then alternates back and forth to current times, and you have these two women and this black gentleman who are the last three people living on this island. And he kind of won't leave the island. He feels like he has to take care of these sisters. And his son's like, why? Like, they don't treat you well, especially the one sister, kind of treats him not like a slave, but like a servant. And so yeah, it's kind of about them, and so it is very slow, paced. It's more about the emotions in these people than like an actual plot. It's very character driven, but I really really enjoyed it, and I like that it had that mystery of Theodosia Burr. And it kind of went back and forth between the two timelines. If it had just been like the current timeline, I think it would have been a little bit more of a slog. But because you kind of have that mystery of the past timeline, and it's like, what's the connection from the past to the current? I really actually enjoyed this. So, um, yeah, there's that one, and that one was for. Let's see, I'll tell you. That one was another historical, and it was T.I. Doubleger, and so it was an author random letter, and I got P, so Parker was what worked for that. And then let's see here. Then we have the Lost Apothecary, which would also work for P. This one was actually for, um, it was another historical, but it was Cusco, and it was a redemption arc. And so in this one, I too many books, I can't remember the names. So you have Nella, and she gives potion to women who are wanting to kind of get rid of their husbands or whoever. And then she meets Eliza, who is a 12-year-old girl. And that kind of changes things for her. And then you have Caroline, who's in current time. So again, you have the dual timeline. And she finds this apothecary vial in the river. And so she kind of goes on this research expedition to figure out, where what this vial where this vial belonged to, like where did it come from and such. And so she kind of goes down this rabbit hole. I did not really enjoy the Caroline timeline. That one wasn't as fun for me. It was very kind of depressing, and I think there was more drama in her timeline than needed to be. Like, I kind of get how it tied in to the past and such, but I really just didn't enjoy that. Like, I really enjoyed the historical timeline though. And overall, like, enjoyed it. I obviously gave it 4 stars, but I think it would have been a 5 star if either that Caroline timeline had been done just a little bit better. I think I would have enjoyed it more if maybe she found the vial and then you kind of go into the story of the past versus jumping back and forth, and then it kind of winds up with her. But I just didn't enjoy her whole line. But I enjoyed the rest of it very very much, and yeah, I actually really like that book. So there's that one. I'm interested in reading more by that author. And then we have our last 4 star, which I actually think I gave 4.5. We have The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. And this one was an orange, so a mystery or thriller, and it needed a number in the title, so obviously 10 works for that. And this is my first Ruth Ware. So I wasn't sure what to expect, whether I would enjoy her writing. And I actually really liked this one. It kept me very entertained. I didn't quite guess who was behind everything. I did guess one of the aspects of who was behind it, but there was kind of a twist that I didn't quite grasp until it was revealed, and then I was like, "Oh, okay." And I kind of thought there was other characters that tied into it that didn't. But yeah, I actually really really enjoyed this, and I love how it ended. And so yeah, it's basically you have this reporter, and she gets invited on this luxury yacht essentially. They're trying to promote it, so people, it's kind of a smaller cruise that you could take, um, because it's more of a yacht size. But she goes on as a reporter, and it kind of has that where you're not sure if you could rely on her as a narrator, kind of like the woman in the window or the woman across the street or whatever, those where you have this character and she sees something, but she's drinking, and so you're not really sure how reliable her memory is and such. It kind of has that same aspect. Yeah, but I just really, really enjoyed it overall. Like, I thought it was a good time, and I didn't guess the twist, and who done it. Like I said, I had an aspect of it that I had figured out, but I didn't have it fully figured out, which was fun. So that is it for my 4-star reads, and then we have all my 5-star reads, which is a good chunk. I think there ended up being 9 5-star reads, so that's fantastic. So the first one actually is not the first one. I put them backwards, so let me get down to the bottom here. But yeah, I really had a great month as far as 5-star reads, which I did last month as too. So really having a lot of 5-star reads lately, which is fantastic. So first we have kind of bottom of the barrel 5-star is Disfigured on Fairytales, Disability, and Making Space. So this is the one that I read for research of disability on the Spoonies Readathon, and I tied into the Grimm's Fairytales. So I looked in the back, and all the ones that she had talked about from Grimm's Fairy Tale is the ones I read. There was only one that I couldn't find. But yeah, this one, she talks about how disability is kind of represented in the fairy tales, and disfigurement and such. This one, I wanted it to be more about the fairy tales than it was. It's really kind of her journey as well. But still really, really good. I really enjoyed it. You can see I tabbed it all up. Just different spots. There were some spots that really struck me, so I kind of bent the tab so I would remember that that's an important tab. Um, so it's like this first one is talking about mobility aids and how people, especially like maybe you're partially ambulatory, so you just need a wheelchair part of the time, and how society kind of pressures you because you can walk, not to use your mobility aid. And I was the same way, like with my service dog. It took me a long time to bite the bullet and use her. I didn't want to use her for a long time. And then when I finally did, it was like, this makes my life so much easier. Why didn't I use her before? So yeah, I really enjoyed this overall and got a lot out of it. I just wish it was a little heavier on the fairy tale, but still really, really good. And obviously, I gave it 5 stars. So, really enjoyed this. Glad I finally was able to pick it up and get it read. This wasn't part of my TBR, so it didn't fulfill any game prompts at all. Then let's see here. Then next we have Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. So this one I wasn't quite sure how I would feel going in. It's a very dark stalker romance, and even at the end, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to give it. I did end up giving it 5 stars because the story I really enjoyed and the writing I really enjoyed. It was the male character, and I kind of saw, like, I was looking at the reviews and such, and I noticed that the reviews that were low were like talking about the male protagonist and how he's not a good guy, and like, I don't think the point is, like, we know he's not a good guy. He does a good thing, but he's not a good guy, and I think that's kind of the point. Like, he's not supposed to be a good guy. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but that's kind of was my feelings on it. Like, we're not supposed to like him. It didn't. I never quite fully grasped though. Like, knowing he's not a good guy, it never quite makes sense to me how what he's fighting for, as far as like against human trafficking and such, and what he does to our female lead. I forget her name. Adeline. Duh, it's in the title. So as far as what he does to Adeline doesn't really add up to me. Um, I don't really understand his reasoning there. Like, okay, like, you're not okay with other men doing this, but you're okay with yourself doing it to her. And does kind of try to explain it like he wants her to see who he truly is, like that he's not a good guy. But it still doesn't make sense if you're not okay with this happening to other women. This woman you supposedly love, you're doing that to her. Never really made sense to me, but I still really like the story. You have this mystery as far as her grandmother, and I really like the writing, and I really like the main character of Adeline. Like she struggles with stuff, and I kind of like that perspective. Like it's kind of like psychological, and she knows what he's doing to her is horrible, and she's fighting against him, fighting against it, but yet she's still feeling this attraction to him and such. And I remember I was watching something, I can't remember what it is now or anything, but it was a survivor, and she was talking about how she learned in therapy, like she had a lot of guilt because she got enjoyment out of what was done to her, like when it was during the act and such. um Her body responded with enjoyment, and so she in therapy, just because your body responds that way does not make what he did okay to what he did to you okay. And so it's kind of like that psychological, like the way her head is and where it is, and how even though she knows what he's doing is not okay and such, how she's kind of struggling with that. uh, and I think it's important, because it shows like, and a lot of abuse victims, like that's why sometimes they don't leave, because they do love their abusers. So I think, kind of from a psychological standpoint, this book is really, really interesting. And so I'm going to be reading the second one in June, and I've heard the second one is kind of way worse as far as um, the extreme scenes and such. So we'll see how I do with the second one, but I actually really did enjoy that one, even though I despise the male character. And I don't think you're supposed to like him. So there's that. So, and then let's see here. And then the next one is the last book for the Spoonies Readathon. This was also June or May's pick for Autism Reads, which is put on by Christine. Um, an autistic reader. Again, will be linked down below. And so this is Can You See Me by Libby Scott and Rebecca Westcott. This book, I was literally reading it just crying. It kind of brought back a lot of stuff from my own history. Now, this one you have um, Tally, and she's 11, but she's going into, they say high school, but it's like middle school essentially. And she's kind of losing her only friend, like she's kind of distancing from herself from her, and she doesn't want anybody else to know she's autistic. Her friend knows, but nobody else does. And so it's just kind of her journey entering high school and all the changes and really struggling with that. And I wasn't really bullied in school, and I always had that one friend, so I wasn't really isolated either. It wasn't until I kind of entered the workforce, but there was a lot of situations and feelings she had that I could really relate to. And so, I mean, I might have just been emotional anyway, who knows, but it really brought up a lot of feelings. And so yeah, this fulfilled the prompt of an easy to read format because I prefer physical reads, and because it's more of a middle grade, that's obviously really, really easy to read. And then an author with a disability. So it fulfilled both those prompts. And yeah, it's actually was 11 at the time of writing this, and then she paired with Rebecca, who is a writer. So I thought this was really, really well done because you got that point of view of a child that age, like, so not an adult trying to write a middle grade, like she's actually this age, she's actually going through it, but she's pairing with a writer to actually make it more cohesive, and well written. So really, really, really enjoyed this one. And I marked something back here, I don't remember why at this point, but um oh, it's the bully. So I saw a lot on the reviews. I always look at the other reviews, and I saw a lot of the criticism for the bullying. And she gets no, and it's like, "Hi, Tally. Look, I'm sorry. Okay, nobody told me that you were autistic, and I wouldn't have called you Weirdo Adams if I known." And a lot of people had a problem with that, but like that's reality. Like everybody says, oh, don't bully, like treat people with kindness and such. But the reality is people bully and then they learn, oh, well, you're autistic or you have a reason to be weird. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bully you. Or as long as you have a reason, you're autistic or whatever, then it's like, I'm sorry, I won't bully you. But if you're just weird, then it's okay to bully them. So I actually thought the bullying was very realistic in this, myself. So there's that. But yeah, this is such a, if you want to kind of get the viewpoint, from an autistic person, like this was really, really good representation. um and it was really, and had like little information, like she would be writing in her diary and she'd talk about masking or demand avoidance, which that's the only thing that kind of got under my skin. There was two things. One, she talks about her autism being a superpower, which, oh, that's a narrative in a lot of the community, and it's a narrative that I never liked. It's kind of gotten under my skin. And two, her demand avoidance, like that was like, she was, it's like you kind of have to learn, which I get, she's 11, so that, kind of help temper it. But it's like, just because you're autistic, does it give you that excuse? So she was kind of coming across bratty in that aspect. But it is a thing. Like, I have it too. Like, if I feel like I need to do something, the more I don't want to do it. So I do understand. And it is a thing that you kind of have to learn. Like, it's not an excuse. You still have to take care of the things and do the things that you need to. So that kind of got under my nerves, and she did come across a little bratty at points. But other than that, like, fantastic representation for sure. So there's that one. Then we have, let's see, and I forgot. So Haunting Adeline was for, it was a romance, and it was Puss in Boots cat pick, and Sherlock picked, which I have a cat named Adeline, and so that's one of the reasons why I put that down there. And then, like I said, Can You See Me was for Autism Read, so it wasn't even part of my game. This one I picked up because Amy at A Star Reads does her viewer prompt, and this one was a random letter generator, and it was a letter K. And so I went to the thrift store and I found this book. It's called Killer of Witches: The Life and Times of Yellow Boy Mescalero Apache, and this is by W. Michael Farmer. And this book, so this was not on my original TBR. I wasn't even actually planning on reading it this month. I was just going to pick up a book and then read it when I could. But I saw this one, I picked it up, and it sounded so interesting. So it's told from the viewpoint of Yellow Boy, who is an Apache, and it's so cool because you're getting that time period, but most of the literature and the narrative, when you're reading like old historical westerns and such, are from the viewpoints of the settlers, where this is from the viewpoint of the Apache. And again, it's based on actual historical. So these Apache, they were on, like, in a concentration camp, and they decided they were just done and they wanted to go home, and so they just disappeared in the middle of the night. So it's based on these Apaches, but it's from his time, from when he was 5 years old on this concentration camp through until he's an adult, and he's going after this. I think he's a Comanche. He's part Mexican, part Comanche, and he ends up killing most of Yellow Boy's tribe. And so he kind of goes on this journey to find and kill this witch. And just an amazing book. Like, so, so good. And I like the historical aspect to it. And I'm so glad. I would have never probably found this and picked it up if I wasn't looking specifically for a book that started with the letter K. And I'm glad I read it this month. Like, I'm glad I did not wait. It was so, so amazing. So yeah, definitely a 5-star read. If you come across this and you're kind of interested, I would definitely pick it up because this was really, really good. I really, really loved it. So, as you can tell by the really, reallys. So there's that one. And then the next one was actually for my genre-a-thon, which I do different genre each month. For I know, read May. Sorry. For me, it was YA, so I know that's not actually a genre, but it was YA and it was just to read any YA. But because science fiction slash, kind of dystopian books aren't my favorite, I was aiming for that, so I chose this one, War Girls by Tochi Anabuchi. And I also was going to read The Hunger Games, didn't quite do that. But I listened to this one, loved it so much, I immediately ordered a physical copy because I just loved it so much. And the thing about this book is it's actually based on civil war in Nigeria. Back in, I don't remember, but back a while back in the 1900s sometimes. Um, so it's based on, it's like a futuristic take on the actual civil war that they went through, which is so cool. And then you kind of have the sister aspect, so you have these two sisters, and there's nuclear war and such, and so they're just trying to, they want a better life and they're just trying to survive in this world. They have, like, the one sister has like a cyborg arm and such. They end up getting separated and they're on either side. So you have the Nigerians and then the Biafrans. And it's just such a cool, like, take on actual, again, historical events. I had a lot of, like, stories based on true historical events this month. And listening to it, I think really added to it because you had that accent. The narrator, I forget who it is, I'll put it here. It's an actress, but did an amazing job with the narration. Like, you had her narrator voice, but then when she was talking as the characters, like, that accent really came out. And I absolutely love the Nigerian accent. So yeah, really good. I love this book. Like I said, I listened to it and immediately got a physical copy to have on my shelves. Definitely gonna read it physically at some point. So there was that one. Then let's see. Then we had A Lost Away, which this one I've been trying to add as an extra to my TBR for ages, and I just haven't been able to. And so this one was for, let's see. So it could be any genre because we had a special square, but it was Bookworm and it needed to be autumn themed. And you can see, like, just kind of the, the way it's like blowing and such kind of made me think of autumn. And it starts off as at Halloween, which was really cool. And so this one, you have, again, the Native American rep, you have Apache, and she has this dog, like, she can bring things kind of to life. And so you have this dog and there's kind of this mystery. I forget what it is. So it's kind of, you have America, but it's magic. So and she lots of ways can raise the ghost of the dead. Um, her beloved cousin has been murdered, and so she's trying to figure out kind of what happened. So it's her and her mom are going to spend time with her husband's wife and um, baby to help them out, and she's kind of researching her cousin comes to her and tells her, that somebody basically killed him. And so she's trying to research this and kind of expose this killer and this whole town, which was a lot of fun. Like, this book is so heavy. It's not that long, but it's just heavy. But yeah, I'm so happy I was finally able to get to this and I was finally able to get it read. And I really like, she had this dog, and it's a Springer Spaniel, which my first dog, Liberty, was a Springer Spaniel. So I definitely have a soft spot in my heart for Springer Spaniels. So she has this companion, and then she has this little trilobite companion as well. It's just so much fun, and like that spiritual aspect with the dead and such. And then you have like these psychics that come and try to do readings and whatnot. It's just really fun. And I absolutely loved it so much. I'm glad I was finally able to get that read. And then we have, so these next two are just kind of in order. So we have A Magic Steeped in Poison and A Venom Dark and Sweet. So A Magic Steeped in Poison was actually my rollover from April because I didn't get all my books read in April. And so this was my mandatory read. I had to read it before I read anything else. So I did. Absolutely love this. So you have, sorry, I'm so bad with names anyway, Ning, and she brews a tea that ends up killing her mom, and makes her little sister real. really sick. And so she ends up going to like the capital, and there's this competition for like these tea brewers. And if she wins, she can ask any favor from the princess. So she ends up going to participate in this competition. But there's again something kind of going on in it's very political, and there's something deeper going on, and the poison tea that she ended up brewing for her mom, like there's something going on with that. I loved it so much. I immediately ended up just wanting to read A Venom Dark and Sweet, so I read both of these this month. This was my rollover. This one was just an extra I added on. Wasn't supposed to read it, and as a series, like this is gonna stick. I love that tea and that magical element, how that plays a part in both stories. And I know like the reviews, like people didn't like A Venom Dark and Sweet as much, and they didn't like that it didn't have as much of that tea aspect in there, but they're no longer in the competition, and I still think there's a lot of tea, kind of that magical tea aspect in the story itself. It's just not on the forefront because the plot now has changed, and it's not about this competition anymore. But oh, I love this, and I loved, you have her kind of love interest, and you're not quite sure if you can trust him or not, and so you're kind of battling that a little bit. So so good. I absolutely love the series. Definitely one I'm going to be rereading in the future. I really really enjoyed that. And then lastly, my last 5 star is Lyrael by Garth and Nix. These. So I had never read The Old Kingdom before. And then I read Sabriel a couple months ago. Absolutely loved it. Been wanting to read this since. Finally had a chance to pick it up. This one was for, let's see, I'll tell you here. Oh, so it was unusable discs. So I had 2 unusable discs. This one is the second in a series, so it works out perfect. But I absolutely adore this book. Again, you have this magical dog that is her companion and talks to her and such and helps her. So in this one, you have Lyrael, and she's a Claire, but she doesn't have the sight. So the Claire have sight; they can kind of see bits of the future. She doesn't have that. She's way past the age when the other one she's still having to wear the children's tunic and such, and so she's just really struggling. She ends up working in the library and kind of getting into trouble there, and then it kind of ties back to Sabriel and such, in a very distinct way. And so she ends up, there's kind of this new dark rising, and she is going to play a part in combating that darkness. So really, really cool. And then you have some other characters and this necromancer and such. But I really like this. And so in Sabriel, you have the Borzen, which is kind of a necromancer in reverse. They put down the dead that other necromancers are raising. And so this kind of tacks on to Sabriel, but it's like 14 years or something in the future after the events of Sabriel. Just really, really cool. Like, I love this. I mean, I've only read 2 books so far. I think there's 6 in the series, but I do have the third one. Definitely going to be trying to get to that soon. But absolutely love this. So there is that one. And that is it as far as the ones that I did get read. I'm going to go over the ones that I didn't get read, and then I will go through my stats of my top 3. So the one that I'm going to be rolling over into June, but I did start, is Mother of Death and Dawn. So I read about 159 pages. In May, I did read a little bit more last night, so I'm now about 200 pages in. But this one I pulled for, it was a black and I moved forward to green. So I needed rabbit, free choice. So when I land on a black, I move forward. I use that genre. So fantasy is green, but I have to pull 2 honey jar prompts. If I can do one book that works for both prompts, that's great. If I can't, then I have to choose 2 books. I was fortunate this worked for both prompts because rabbit was a free pick. So it could literally be anything. And then I got a bookworm, which was dictionary word of the day, which was Demarche, which is basically like your, I forget the I can tell you. I have my other notes here. But Demarche, the meaning was course of action or maneuver, especially political or diplomatic, a petition or protest presented through diplomatic channels. And originally in this series, you had Tasana, who goes to the orders and agrees to help them if they help free her people. So, and there is a lot of political like wars and such and going on in the series. So yeah, this is the last one in the series, which makes me very sad, which is another reason like I love the series so much. I love the characters, and I just really really want to savor it. I don't want to rush through this one. I'm kind of hesitant, like I don't want it to end, so like I'm just gonna take my time and enjoy this. But you have Tasana, like I said, she's originally a slave, and she escapes. She goes to buy her freedom, and her master turns on her, and so she ends up escaping and going to the orders, and she wants to learn about her magic and get their help to help free the other slaves she left behind. And then the orders are kind of using her, and they send her to Max to be trained in the first one, and then it kind of just spirals out from there as far as war and fighting to get her people free and such. And in this one, it's gotten a lot more. There's a new kind of player in the mix and such, which we were introduced to in the last one. But it's so good. Like the series is amazing, and I can't wait. After I'm done with this one, I'm gonna be reading Secret and the Wings of Night, which is her next series, and I think the second book is out too. I'm gonna try to pick up both of those, and I think I'm gonna love those and even more because I love Chris Broadbent's writing, and those ones have vampires, which I always love vampires. So but I've just been really, really enjoying this. I love Max and Tasana's relationship. I love each of them as characters and the whole story and everything. It's just really, really amazing. So yeah, I'm gonna be continuing on with this one in June. But I did at least start it in May, and this was the last one for my TBR um, game TBR. So there's that. I did not get to the Hunger Games, which was my other pick for my genre-a-thon. I'm not gonna read this one. I'm happy I got one book read. I got the War Girls read for that one. So this one's gonna go back on my shelves, and hopefully I can read it at a different point. I did not make any more progress on Little Women. Still just sitting at the same amount that I read before. It's been months now. I still plan on reading this. It's just I've had big TBRs and such. So this one is going to continue to roll over until I get it read. It's just going to keep rolling over. Hopefully I'll be able to get some more at least progress done this month. But we'll just see, or in June, we'll just see how it goes. So there's that one. And then my two ABC author books, we have Eve by W.M. Paul Young and Who is a River by Paul Zallis. Again, just going to keep rolling over till I actually end up reading them. If I ever get a chance to put them officially on a TBR, I will. But at this point, it's just is what it is. So then I had extras that I was hoping to get to. Obviously, I didn't. Skin Game by Jim Butcher. This is the third to the last one that will get me to the current number of books. The other two I was hoping to read as extras in June. Since I didn't read this one, I'm hoping to add this to my June TBR, but we shall see. I also had hoped to continue the Four Horsemen series by Laura Thalassa. I'm on Famine. Again, in June, I was hoping to read Death, but since I haven't gotten Famine, I'm hoping I can at least get this one on June's TBR. And then I do want to continue on with Death Note Black Edition. I'm on volume 3, so this has volumes 5 and 6. But yeah, just didn't have time, even though it's a manga, it's super easy to read. We'll see if I can get that on June's TBR as well. But that is it as far as what I was hoping to read in May and what I did get read. So not a bad month at all. As far as my stats go, I did read 5,715 pages. Audio hours was 12 hours and 57 minutes. I read 17 fiction, 2 nonfiction. 18 of those were physical, 1 audio, and 1 was a reread. My genres, again, these kind of overlap. I had 5 young adult, 5 fantasy, 4 historical, 3 classics, 3 thrillers, 2 science fiction, 2 romance, 2 mystery, 2 literary, 2 contemporary, one middle grade, one dystopian, one sociology, one erotica, which was probably haunting Adeline, one children's, one LGBTQ plus, one memoir, one health, and one biography. My top moods were, as always, adventurous, mysterious, and then I had reflective and emotional. So pretty on par to what I generally am reading. And then my top three, number one was War Girls. Again, I absolutely love that book. And it was, I love the history in there, like the fact that it's actually a futuristic telling of an actual civil war that went on. I thought was amazing. That futuristic element I thought was really cool there. The sister bond, and then like I said, the narration. Like the narration really, really made it like just that extra notch more enjoyable for me. Because I really like that Nigerian accent. And then number two, of course, is Can You See Me by Libby Scott and Rebecca Westcott. I like that it was current to the author's age slash experience, or the, Libby. I really thought that was, it just really helped, I think, from the perspective, because she's living it at the time she was writing it. So I thought the representation was fantastic, a great rep. I thought it was informative, like those little, like, informative without being over the top. Just giving people that maybe not don't know just kind of an idea of what it is. So I thought that was good, and it was well written because they paired her with an actual writer, and Rebecca. So I thought it was really, really well written as well. So there's that. And then my number three spot actually has two books because they were so similar that I didn't know like which one to go with. And so I have Follow the River by James Alexander Thom and Killer of Witches by W. Michael Farmer. And again, the historical aspect in both. Like you have, Mary Ingalls really did get captured and really did make her way back. Nina's Coyote Howl. Really did make her way back. And then you really had these Apaches who disappeared in the middle of the night, and such. And again, there was more than just that event that was based on actual historical things. You had the native versus captive POV, so you kind of have the POV of Mary Ingalls. Then you also have this native POV, and I really kind of like being able to read both of those in this month and having those viewpoints were really, really cool. The journey of the characters, because each character goes on a journey. Mary Ingalls gets captured and goes and taken from Virginia to Ohio, and then has to traverse back. And same thing, Yellow Boy. He gets taken from his home. Like he doesn't really remember that he was less than 5, but then he goes and they have a camp, and that gets attacked, and so he kind of has to go on this journey as well to find the killer of or the witch and kill him. So that was really cool. And the landscape played a big part in both. Obviously, Killer of Witches was more southwest, which is what I'm used to, but the mountainous, rivery terrain that Mary Ingalls had to cross was really enjoyable as well. So I really liked the landscape. I hauled a lot of books. I ended up hauling 48 books, but I also unhauled finally. I unhauled 47 books. And I gave 14 to Little Free Libraries. I gave 24 to the independent bookstore, and I took 9 to the thrift store. So, yeah, that is it as far as my May wrap up goes. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're interested in reading any of these books. Um, like I said, there are so many amazing books this month. Like, I am really, really happy with what I was able to read. It was just a fantastic month. But let me know if you've read any of them, if you're interested in any of them, what maybe your favorite book you read in May was, and I'll go ahead and leave you guys here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.